Good evening and welcome to another edition of Longevity Kitchen with me, Julie Gibson Clark. I think it's kind of obvious what we might be talking about tonight, greens. And I have clearly got a whole boatload of them here, but I wanted to come up with a way to hopefully shift your thinking from, a healthy side dish to longevity on a plate. These things are nutritional powerhouses, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But what I wanted to do tonight was come up with three ways to cook them and illustrate, there's different ways to do this. And of course, who better to teach us how to cook greens than the Blue Zone? So I pulled out my Blue Zones cookbook here, by Dan Buettner. Hopefully you've had a chance to see that documentary. And we are going to cook a recipe from Okinawa. We're going to cook a recipe from Icarea, and we're going to cook a recipe from Sardinia. And in fact, this whole thing was inspired by Chris Mirabili. He's the CEO of Novos. He has an Instagram page, which I am going to link to in the show notes, called Slow My Age. Highly encourage you to take a look at that. He's just got so much wonderful information, but recently he was on a trip to Sardinia, and I have been longing to travel. It's been a few years since I've been overseas, and whenever I can't travel, I figure, well, let me at least cook the food from that country. It helps maybe quell my desire for a little bit. But anyway, so I pulled my Blue Zones cookbook out and found this gorgeous recipe of greens and onions in here from Sardinia. And then I thought, these things come together so quickly. Why don't I cook 3 of them, and hopefully you guys will find one that you like. One of the things that sort of weird topic, when I started in my career as an engineer, and I'd go out on the construction site, and one of the common phraseologies was like, you've got cheap, good, and fast, and you can't have all 3. You can have 2, but you can't have all 3. And maybe you've heard that in other contexts as well. But I think greens actually defy that whole thing because, one, these things are cheap. I mean, this is like, I've got in here, some of them are dandelion greens, and you can actually pick these out of a field. Now, I didn't go picking these out of the field because I'm not sure what kind of pesticides and herbicides they use. But, if you are certain that, the field that you want to pick these from are, I suppose, organic in some fashion, then you could go get them for free. And in fact, I think that's what these long-lived populations were doing. They're grabbing greens and they're having different types of greens at different types of the year, doing different things for their health, and we'll talk about that. So anyway, so they are cheap. They come together so fast. They take longer to wash than they do actually to cook. You're gonna see, we're gonna be able to cook three dishes like that in a snap tonight. And they are so good for you. But I just wanted to mention one other thing before we get into that, which was I have another recipe for greens that when I thought about this episode, I really wanted to cook, which made me start thinking, hey, are there other Blue Zones? So one of my very favorite greens recipe is palak paneer and sag paneer, which sag is just mixed greens with paneer cheese, and palak, if my understanding is correct, palak is just spinach with paneer. And I would love to cook that for you guys, but it's a little bit more involved. It's absolutely delicious, but I kept thinking, there are long-lived people in India as well. Didn't they, why isn't that a Blue Zone? So, and sure enough, there were several zones around the world that didn't make it into the final cut of the Blue Zone. So there's an area in Pakistan, there was an area in Ecuador, there's an area between Azerbaijan and Georgia in the mountains there. And then of course there's an area, maybe even several areas in India where there are long-lived people. And I bet many of them all eat greens. Again, they've got to be ridiculously affordable. You're out, seeing them everywhere. And I imagine you would just, eat them and try them. And I know dandelion root, if you've ever just chewed on it, it's very bitter and very healthy for your digestion. So I'd imagine they'd have been putting together that there's something in here that's very good for us. Okay, So that's my love of the light blue zones and the blue zones and greens. But why are these things good for you? Well, they have folate, betaine, antioxidants, polyphenols, chlorophyll. They have fermentable fiber as well as bitter compounds, and they are very low in calories. I mean, like, I don't know if it gets any better than that. Again, there's a ton of vitamins. I think there's vitamin K in many of them, magnesium. I mean, I could go on and on, but these are the ones that I wanted to highlight in the course of longevity. Okay, let's talk about why these little guys are longevity on a plate. Why are they so good for you? Well, first up, microbiome. Super, super good for feeding your healthy microbiome. They're full of different fibers and different polyphenols that feed healthy gut bacteria. They help you produce butyrate, your butyrate production. And butyrate is really good for your intestinal lining as well as, or your gut barrier function, as well as gut inflammation and long-term gene expression. They also help with methylation. So there's betaine and folate in here, and these are nutritional little powerhouses for methylation. And methylation, I've talked at great length about methylation and what foods are good for that. In this episode here, I'll link here, it's called the Greens Latte. Just go head to the end and we talk about methylation, what it is, and different nutrients to support methylation. But greens, with their betaine and folate and certainly other things, help healthy methylation, which helps with DNA repair, it helps with neurotransmitter balance, and it also helps with detoxification. I mean, again, just a cheap little green that comes together quickly is already stacking up to do some cool stuff, but there's more. All right, so we just kind of touched on it a second ago with methylation, but these guys support your detox pathways. They have glucosinolates in here for liver support and estrogen balance. They also, particularly the dandelion and other bitter greens, help stimulate bile and enzyme production, which help with your digestion. And greens, last but not least, well, there's many things they do, but these are the things I picked for longevity that they do. We can't really talk for hours about greens. I really want to get to cooking. But last but not least, greens turn down inflammation. They are full of antioxidants, polyphenols, and chlorophyll. Oh, sorry, one more thing. They help modulate your immune system signaling in autoimmunity and aging. So very important. Obviously, immune system isn't just for colds and flus. We're seeing more and more what I'm hearing and reading more and more about the immune system's role that it plays in cancer protection. So we really want to make sure we stay healthy in that regard as well. Okay, so those are the things I picked. I think that's plenty. There's probably plenty more. The only thing I'm going to touch on are there are anti-nutrients in greens, and those are oxalates. Spinach is particularly high in oxalates. Now, oxalates aren't a problem for everybody, and if you cook your greens and pour off the water, which obviously it does reduce the vitamin count, but there's still a lot left. But it does reduce the oxalates considerably. So if you're concerned about that, just know that greens do have oxalates, and cooking them helps reduce them, okay? So let's get cooking. How are we gonna do this? We've got 3 recipes. Well, I thought what we would do is cook the dish from Sardinia first. It's a little different. So it's basically, we're gonna saute some onions, and then we're gonna add greens and season it with salt and pepper. It couldn't be simpler. And in that recipe here, it calls for 3 pounds of greens, which is about 1.5 kilos. It's a little under, but this is, if there's ever a place where it's not rocket science, greens are definitely one of them. They're very forgiving. So, and this calls for, like you chopping up all your own greens and things like that. And I did get a bunch of, I got a bunch of dandelion greens, and I did wash them and I chopped them. And the way that I do that is I cut off most of this stem. In some dishes, I'll chop this up even really finely, but in this one I didn't. I just kind of pulled those off, and I just have the greens and I chopped those. And then I'm also mixing it with These power greens I get from Costco, and they are pre-washed, so it's quite beautiful. They are baby chard, baby kale, and baby spinach, so they're not real tough. And these recipes here typically call for either cooking the greens a long time, as in the case of the Sardinian one, but the ones for Okinawa and Icarian, they say to boil the greens. So like imagine if you had like kind of that harder kale type of green, you know, you'd pull the spine out, you'd measure out the amount of greens they call for, which is 8 cups, which is the weirdest thing, and I'll figure out what that is in kilos in just a second, but 8 cups of greens. Nobody measures in cups, but 8 cups of greens, and you would boil it in water and then pour off, you know, pull them out of the boiling water. I'm going to do it a little differently, mainly because these greens are so tender because they're baby. So we are actually just going to saute those greens up. So again, to be clear, I'm going to do a recipe for Sardinia, which we're going to saute the onions, and then we're going to add 1.5 kilos or 3 pounds of greens to. That's this one. And then what I'm going to do for the recipe for Okinawa and for Icarian is basically calls for cooked greens, and then you just either, in the case of Icarian, we're going to squeeze some lemon juice and olive oil over it. And in the case of Okinawa, we are actually going to make a little what they call a glaze with orange juice, miso, and mirin, and I'll make that here in just a second. So I figured I'll cook the Sardinian greens and onions first. I'll pull that out of the pan. I'll cook up all these greens, then divide them back in half. Put the onion and olive oil on one of them. We've got Icarian, and then we'll put the glaze on the other one, and we've got the recipe from Okinawa. So obviously those recipes will all be down below in the show notes as well, and a link to this cookbook. I really do love this cookbook. It's simple, fast, good, and cheap. It's mostly, and in fact, if anybody is, you know, vegan out there, there is a lot of vegan recipes. And of course, there's the Loma Linda, you know, which is vegetarian. So there's a lot of vegetarian and vegan recipes in here that are ridiculously healthy and come together very quickly. There's a minestrone soup 3 ways that I've made that was absolutely outstanding. So definitely enjoy this one. So I'll have a link to that and how to cook it. All right, let's get cooking. We are going to cook 2 Vidalia onions in some olive oil here. And the recipe called for 1, but I love Vidalia onions, so I thought I would cook up 2. Sorry for the noise here. We'll cook up 2 onions until they're translucent, and then we are going to fit this monstrosity of all these greens is going to fit in this little pan, and you'll see how. Okay, these are almost ready. This takes a few minutes. Now we're not caramelizing them. You can see they're getting brown, but just until translucent. And then we are going to start basically melting down the greens. Let's see if I can get these in. I'm going to use my hand. And you just let some of them cook down. I mean, this huge bowl is going to cook down to like a handful. So I just put in as many as I can. So remember, I still have a whole nother bag to add. That in. I'm going to put the top on it and let them cook down just a little bit. Okay, let's see how far they've cooked down. Wow, already, I haven't even stirred them. Start stirring them up, and once they cook down enough to fit the other bag in, we'll put that in as well. Look at that. It's already down so much. I'm going to start putting this next bag in. Okay, I still have about half a bag left of this. Sorry, it's not the best. Anyway, half a bag left, but we'll let these cook down for a second. And okay, let's stir them up. Oh, they smell delicious. You can see how much they're melting down. I cannot even believe this. Those huge bowl and the huge bag. I think I'll be able to fit the rest of it in here. Look at that. 3 pounds of greens, 1.5 kilos of greens cooking down to like nothing. Let that steam for a second, and I'll bring you back. Okay, let's check and see where we're at. Almost done. I am so glad I added the extra onion. I don't think one would have been enough. So if you do make the recipe straight out of the book, I would definitely encourage 2 onions for sure. Okay, these are almost ready. All right. All right, I think these are ready. Now I'm going to cook down the greens just like I did here. I'm going to cook down the greens for the other 2 recipes, and then I'll meet you back at my kitchen counter where we will put this all together. Just final, do some pepper and some salt, just using some Himalayan sea salt here. Stir it up one more time. Okay, I'll meet you back at my kitchen counter in just a second. Okay, so let's finish this up. To review what we did for Sardinia, we sauteed 2 Vidalia onions that were sliced and then added 3 pounds of greens, which I had told you how much it was in kilos, which I think was like around 1.5 kilos, if I remember correctly. And now for the other 2 recipes, I just cooked all the greens at once and I've split them in 2 in this pot, and then we're gonna make the glaze or the sauce that goes over the dressing, I suppose. For Icarian, we would call it a dressing, right? It's just gonna be lemon juice and olive oil. So let's make, this is the Okinawan, and what I've got is 2 tablespoons of white miso. So I'm gonna put that in here and mix that with, we've got mirin and orange juice. So it's also 2 tablespoons. So it looks like equal parts. 2 tablespoons of mirin and 2 tablespoons of orange juice. I'm going to put a little bit of orange juice in here first. Try to just start mixing down this miso. I don't know if you've ever played around with miso, but it's something I've learned now just to keep in my fridge. Just adds a nice extra flavor to things. You can make dressing with it. It's not just for miso soup, but miso soup is also very, very good. But the salad dressing made from miso is also very good. Add a little honey, a little bit of rice wine vinegar, and some oils for a dressing. Okay, I'm just gonna keep adding the orange juice here, and we're just gonna whisk this up. Sorry you can't see it. It's really so ridiculously easy though. We're just whisking these 3 equal parts together. And then we're going to pour them over the greens. Okay. Okay, for the greens for Icarian, we're going to use this container. Basically, just going to do a nice little plate of greens. And his recipe calls for a whole 1/3 of a cup of olive oil. That just seems like way too much for me when I'm looking at that much greens. And in fact, even like both of the halves of a lemon. I might just do a half a lemon. I'm not sure if it's just that I used a different type of green and so it melted down more. So I think that's all I'm gonna do. Half a lemon, and I'm not gonna use all this olive oil. I'm just gonna do a drizzle. That would be way too much. Now, what's interesting, so you can see this one and from Sardinia both have olive oil. Yes, I didn't even use half of a third, so maybe an eighth of a cup of olive oil. Just drizzle it with olive oil, okay? So there we go. That's the Greek dish. Let's do the Okinawan style. I'll pull this is the one from Sardinia. I'll pull these back in just a second and bring you in to check it out. And then from Okinawa, we'll use another platter. It's gonna look a bit lost on this platter, but it is what it is, right? Okay. So what was interesting in this recipe, you know, they just said to cook the greens in water and then glaze them with the sauce that I just made. And there's no fat in miso, and no fat in mirin, and no fat in orange juice, obviously. So I'm a little bit surprised because typically greens you need to have a little bit of fat. I mean, not, you know, doesn't need to be swimming in it, certainly, but that helps with the vitamin K absorption, and I'm sure there's probably some other nutrients in there that need a little bit of fat for better absorption. So, again, just gonna do something like that. Excuse me. And also, I'm not going to put this whole thing on here. There's no way. So, just glaze it with this. So anyway, in this recipe, I would just, you know, make sure you have a little bit of oil. Maybe I cooked them in a little bit of olive oil already, so I know I don't need to add any. Yeah, again, I'm not even adding half of this sauce, but oh my God, I cannot believe, but like this whole thing, I started cooking, and this is with all the faffing about as a cooking show can do. I started cooking at 6 o'clock. It is now 6:30, and we have, look at this. Look at these beautiful greens. We've gone round the world in greens. So we've got Greek Icarian, that's got the lemon juice and the olive oil over a mixed greens. We've got Okinawa, which has got that beautiful orange miso mirin glaze. Look at that, gorgeous. And we have Vidalia, onions and greens from Sardinia. I am so excited to tear into this stuff, but I won't eat it in front of you because that would be rude, I suppose. But anyway, I can't wait. And actually, my very, very favorite thing about this is I love cold greens out of the fridge. I don't know about you guys if you've ever tried that, but they're wonderful when you first cook them, but they're even better as leftovers. And so if you can't eat them, you know, all at once, it's a great thing for a prep Sunday if you wanted to add that to your prep Sunday, which I usually do, but I don't usually add sauces to them. I just cook them up and then I put them in my smoothies. But it's been really fun to have this, and I'm gonna have these with dinner instead of salads this week, and I will actually be eating them cold. So anyway, that is it. I hope this encourages you to get the greens out. Oh, I was gonna tell you, so 8 cups of greens, which is what was called for in these recipes, was like 340, but they'll say 350 grams of greens, and that was about 3/4 pounds of greens. So I think you could easily, though, for those recipes, double that and do, you know, 750 grams of greens and or 1.5 pounds of greens for these recipes easily. I mean, if you're gonna cook them all at once like I did, maybe you wanna keep them at that, but we are gonna have greens for days around here, but it will not be a problem. I guarantee you I will eat these things up in a week, No issues. All right, you guys, have a wonderful week, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon. All right. Oh my God. Guys, these are so good. I think the Okinawans are my favorite though. You have to try these. Sorry. This one rocks the house. This one is absolutely delicious with the lemon and the olive oil. And I love, love, love the onions in this one. I am in greens heaven. I am in greens heaven. Yes, sir. All right, I think I'm just gonna take this and I'm gonna go. All right, good night.